So, update on the van. I'm still working on the brake lines. As I said in the last video, I had a whole lot of other work to do, so I'm just getting back to it. But today I thought I'd do sort of a mini tutorial on how to flare a brake line when all you have is a cheap flare tool, not one of the quality ones that you can get out there for, they can be a little bit pricey, just one of the very inexpensive ones. I got mine from AutoZone. I'm actually really happy with it, but I knew going in that it was going to be a cheaper tool. Because I don't have the tools I need to ream out the interior, what I've done of the brake line after you cut it, and if you don't know how to flare from scratch, go ahead, find another video on this. This is just, I'm going to show you how to do it when all you have is the cheap tool. If you already understand how to flare brake lines, great, follow along, you'll see how to do it using one of these. What I use is a pair of cutters to ream the inside. I get the smallest cutter I can, and it works perfect for getting inside. Now, I've already cut this brake line. I did use a cutting tool. You can get these just about anywhere. They're pretty cheap, and this makes it real nice to just kind of work yourself around the inside. And you do want to make sure you do this, especially if you have one of these cheaper tool sets, these flaring tool sets. It really makes life a lot easier, and just run that sucker around in there a couple of times. It'll work out great. Now, I'm using a 3/16, which is the smallest size they have, and I've got this little button cap that goes in it. It's called an Anvil, and what you need to do with that Anvil is use that to set the height inside the clamp. Okay, now with the clamp, especially on these small ones, you always want to start the clamping at the nut closest to where you are working. Okay, so what you do is you set it in the tool like this. You use your cap. If you have a slightly different tool, make sure you read the instructions to see where on the cap they want it. And what I do is I put the cap right between the seam so that it sets on both, and set it up to where it needs to be. If you set on one side or the other, what happens is that these tools, because they are a little less than quality, will tend to shift off a little bit. And it's literally micrometers, but as you can see, this will not slide past, and that makes it too high on one side or too low on the other. You need it to be on both sides. So if you set that on in between, you can see I can now slide back and forth between, and just get yourself set up just like that. Put it right where you need it to be. I would rather have it ever so microscopically too low than too high, because these tools do not handle too high very well at all. You tend up breaking the little tip off of the Anvil. You can see that little tip that sticks up, and you need that tip on here. Once you start to hand tighten it down as you saw me do, and just to hold everything in place, just get it with your fingers and double check it. Now, if you have one of the tools that have the big wing nuts, you want to only use about the same amount of force that you would use using your hands on a nut. Double check it, make sure both sides, make sure that it's there. And like I say, you want, if you can slide a piece of paper in between, it's too far down, but if you can see light in between and not slide that piece of paper, you're probably about right. Now, once again, with these cheaper tools, you're going to want to tighten on the side that's closest to the line first, okay? And you want to get that real nice and snug, and then come over to the other side. Now, we're not talking gorilla grip here. We're talking just real nice and snug, and then go to the other side. Once I've got a couple turns in it, I double check. I can still slide between both sides, which is what I want. I am still just touching. I can't even see the light between it now like I could in just a couple of seconds ago. So it's actually adjusted itself in there pretty good. I'm going to go back to the first side, give it another nice snug, and then I'm going to come back to this side and snug it down. Now, this is going to be the same with pretty much every flaring tool out there as far as getting it set up. up. The really nice ones that you're going to spend a couple $100 on, they won't have so much shift back and forth between the two. I kind of call it a scissor action, and then once everything's tightened down, check it one more time, you can see everything slides. Now this is where the cheap tools come in, run into a problem. You're going to put your anvil in it, and then I'm going to start pressing it down, and the camera's not going to pick this up very well, but as I start to tighten this down, it is going to tend to cock sideways. Every flare I've ever done with one of these inexpensive tools has done that. Be prepared for it. Okay, so I'm going to put the tool on, the point goes into the top of the anvil, I start tightening it down by hand just to get everything snug, and I look and I can already see that it's just slightly off center. There is no way the camera is going to pick this up, but you have to really eyeball that to make sure. Even though it's just slightly not coming down straight, I'm going to go ahead and put a turn or so on it. Okay, and now I can really see it. Once I do that, because it's turned sideways a little bit, the line is actually going to hold that anvil in place, that little hat. Back everything off, put the point on the side that's high, not in the hole, and just ever so slightly give it a turn. You're not going to put pressure on it beyond just past hand tight, and then go back to tighten it down again. Now this one's still a little bit off, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to back it out again, and I'm going to put that point back up on that high side, and I'm going to give it just a little bit more than I did last time. What we're doing is we're just straightening that top out, okay? If you don't, what happens is this thing will continue to twist sideways until it breaks that tip off of the anvil. You can't get the tip back out of the brake line, and you have to go get a new anvil, which they don't sell for these cheap tools, so you buy a new cheap tool. And a cheap tool at 20 bucks a pop gets expensive when you start breaking those anvils off, okay? So I got it to straighten back out again, and I'm going to give it a little more turn and flare it down from the center again. As I flare it down, I see that it's starting to ride up on that side again, so I'm going to back out. I'm going to put it back up, put that point back up on that high side, and I'm going to tighten it down again. Now this can get a little fidgety, but if you don't do it, you will break that tip off of the anvil. I'm going to give it a little bit more this time than I did the last time, because it just doesn't seem to want to be straightening itself out. And I'm actually going to do it in 2 spots. There we go, and now it should be a little closer to centered. Okay. The reason it kind of cocks off center with these is that you can never get the tube absolutely perfectly straight. When you cut it, even with one of these cutting tools, it tends to be just a tiny bit off. That, or you might have a little burr at the end, and that just holds everything back. Now it looks really straight to me, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten it down some more. And this one's still looking straight. And now it's starting to rise high on the other side. So I'm going to back it off, and you really got to watch this, because these cheap tools, they just can't handle being pushed sideways. So we're going to pack it off, and I'm going to put that tip back up on the top again. Now these cheap tools make some wonderful flares as long as you go through all of this that I'm going through now. If you don't, they will they'll break off, and then you start all over with a new tool and a new brake line. So you'll see I barely put any on there at all, and yeah, that looks all nice and straight again. So, and sometimes you can get it to straighten out if it's just barely off, just by kind of shifting the press around a little bit. And this one, I think I'm going to be able to do that. There we go. And I'm going to tighten her back down again a little bit more. Now it's, once again, it's riding high on the original side, so I'm going to back that back off, and I'm going to do that all over again. Now if you have a really good expensive brake press, you're not going to have this problem, but I'm only using this for this one project. I'm not an auto mechanic as a full-time job or anything, so it's just not worth it to me. So once again, I give it just a little bit of a press there, and that should straighten everything out. Crank it back down, and let's see if this gets it. And there we go. It looks like it's going to flatten right down. I'm still a little bit high on one side, but I'm going to give that just a little bit of a push and see what happens. And it looks like it's going to straighten itself out for me at this point. So I go down till it's pretty much flat. You won't get it all the way flat with these tools. Don't try. It's just not worth the effort to try to get it to go all the way down. You can if you really work at it, but we're talking micro millimeters here of it being a little bit off. So once again, I straighten that hat out just a little bit, that anvil, and I'm going to give it one more, and I can already see that it's already flat on one side, and this one might actually flatten all the way out for me. So, and when I give it a good crank, this one went all the way down except for just an ever so slight bit on one edge. I will never get that to go the rest of the way down with this cheap tool, so I'm not going to stress it. Take that off. Now you'll find that this tends to be trapped in there. Take a pair of pliers, give it a twist back and forth, and out it comes, and you see the hat stayed intact. I still have the little nib on the end. It did not break off like what these tools are so famous for doing. The rest of it's just a normal flaring out the brake line. You won't have to worry about it going sideways or anything. You've already done the first flare, so then you just get that point down into the center of it, make sure everything looks straight and square, and then just tighten it down. Once again, you don't have to go super gorilla on this. Just get it to where it kind of wants to stop on you with using a pretty good force. I wish that these came with torque specs of some sort, because I would gladly use a torque wrench on these just to make sure I don't overdo it or underdo it. But if you've done brake lines in the past, you know about what you need. So, and pull that down, zip that back out, pull it off. Find my other wrench and open it back up. Then, once you get it to open back up, you'll find, one more little shot, you have a nicely flared brake line. Now, because I'm brand new to doing YouTube videos and I got quite distracted by it, you'll also realize I forgot to put my fitting on. So I'm going to cut that back off and put the new fitting on it. I'll probably have to make this pipe all over again, but I have plenty of brake line to do that, because if I cut this short, I'm going to have to cut it too far short using this tool, and I will not reach where it's supposed to screw into. So I hope you found this enjoyable, and don't worry about me with the making a new brake line. I wasn't real happy with the shape of this one, so it won't be a big deal. Like I say, I have plenty of line left, and I'll just throw a new one together. One nice thing that this one came with off of the original was this spring that goes around it. This is actually going to go right up over the frame and then back down into the frame. The spring will be farther down towards here, and that's nice because it'll keep anything from chafing on the frame where it goes, because there's nothing to hold it in place except the ends. So as the vehicle moves, it's going to vibrate and move, and if it's touching the frame anywhere, it could eventually work right through this. The other brake line I did that goes across to the other side of the vehicle, it actually is held onto the frame in several spots, so it's not going to have that vibration issue. Because I'm making my own, I will probably put something behind certain spots to protect it, just to make sure, because it is not factory and it's not going to fit just as perfect as the old one. So I hope you found this helpful, and I will continue another video later once I get all this put back together and give you an update on the van. Have a good one. Just a little something I forgot originally. When you get one of these tools and it's still new, go ahead and take the nuts completely off here and here, and put some grease on the threads, just a little bit of grease on the threads. Do the same with the Anvil. Pull it all the way out, grease the threads on this side, then run it all the way back in, and I'm not going to run it all the way in, and then put grease on this side also. That way it will the tool will last a lot longer. Because of the way they make these tools, if you don't do that, you might only get 2 or 3 uses out of them, and they will start to fail on you. So a little bit of grease on those goes a long ways, and then if you use it down the road, make sure you grease it again down the road. You want to throw some grease on there every 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 fittings if you're using it continually. Even with the expensive tools, that's a very good idea. It just makes the threads last a lot longer.